Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. They read the Quran in the light of Greek thought. As we saw, before we move on, one thing needs to be emphasized, and that is when we apart from the Arabic language, and number two, the Quran explaining itself at other places, and the attributable interpretation to the Prophet and the overall consensus on understanding the basic of the Islamic and the Quranic worldview. Apart from these, there's no other way to understand the Quran except based on our current knowledge. And that's why every new generation need to reinterpret the Quran in the light of up-to-date human knowledge. There's no doubt about that. And that's why you need new tafsirs, and they keep appearing, and they have kept appearing in every generation since the first standalone tafsir appeared in the 3rd century. So there's no doubt that, and that's why Quran says that سَنُرِيهِمْ آيَاتِنَا فِي الْآفَاقِ وَفِي أَنفُسِهِمْ حَتَّى يَتَبَيَّنَ لَهُمْ أَنَّهُ الْحَقُّ مِنْ رَبِّهِمْ. And Quran uses سَنُرِيهِمْ, the future tense here, and the meaning of it is that according to the advances in human knowledge, Quran will reveal its hidden meaning to every generations, so that they will understand that it is from their Lord and it is based on the truth. So in the light of this, there's no problem in us understanding the Quran in the light of the Greek thought or any other thought. as long as we understand, we realize that our understanding is contingent and is going to be superseded either by our own future knowledge or by the effort of the next generations. So that's not a problem. But it's a problem to say empirically that they read the Quran in the light of the Greek thought. I mean, as far as the Greek thought of was part of the third and fourth and fifth and sixth century of the Muslim era, as long as the Greek thought was part of the formulation, the part of the fabric of the episteme of the centuries, it can't be avoided that they understood the Quran in light of that thought, because that was their current knowledge. The only thing I would want to contest is that the Greek thought was ever a dominant part of a Muslim worldview, and that's an empirical question. But the thing to be contested is that it took them over 200 years to perceive, though not quite clearly, that the spirit of the Quran was essentially anti-classical, and the result of this perception was a kind of intellectual revolt, the full significance of which has not been realized even up to the present day. So what we want to contest here is not that Muslims read Quran in the light of the current knowledge at the time, but I want to only contest the empirical question whether the Greek thought was ever a dominant part of the episteme of any Muslim culture. In fact, we can claim that today, more than any time in the history of Islam, Muslim thought is dominated by the modernist thought, but the similar claim cannot be made about 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th century, when Islam was the dominant civilization and the Greeks weren't a dominant civilization at the time, and their knowledge was communicated to Muslims through Christian and other channels, and Christians were defeated by Muslims. In all the Persians were defeated by Muslims. So they were the dominant civilization. So what they were taking was as mostly with the dominant hand, and they were picking and choosing what was useful for them. And the second thing which I want to contest, and that's more important, is that there is ever a point where the spirit of the Quran is dominated by an alien thought to such an extent that it is difficult to understand it. And that is not an empirical claim. That's a claim which is based on the idea that the Quran is preserved by the God Himself. That's the belief system. And part of this preservation is preservation of its meaning. And this is mainly done through the preservation, two sources: preservation of the classical Arabic language, and also the second, the preservation through consensus of the community. That is ijma, ulama al-Muslimin. So in those three bases, we should reject the claim that, well, the empirical base, that the Greek thought was ever a dominant force in the Islamic world, especially not when Ghazali was writing or before that. And second, because the meaning of the Quran and its spirit cannot be fully overshadowed by an alien thought because of the preservation of the Quran, and that is safeguarded through the classical Arabic language and also through the consensus. So they read the Quran in the light of Greek thought. It took them over 200 years to perceive, though not quite clearly, that the spirit of the Quran was essentially anti-classical. And the result of this perception was a kind of intellectual revolt, the full significance of which has not been realized even up to the present day. It was partly owing to this revolt and partly to his personal history that Ghazali based religion on philosophical skepticism, or rather unsafe basis for religion, and not wholly justified by the spirit of the Quran. Now, if there was no dominance, then it should be clear that there was no revolt. A revolt sort of does presuppose some sort of. And Ghazali's great work should be seen as more as his individual mission as a mujaddid. Based on his unique experiences and his personal history, as he has chronicled in Al-Munqidh min al-Dalal. And there's no doubt that people within vanquished or defeated Persian, and Christian and Roman empires used philosophical writings to justify and propagate their war, secret war on Islam. Um, and Ghazali's main aim was those people and the Muslim scholars themselves who were starting to use the method of philosophy and kalam, method of philosophy and logic in kalam. So Ghazali's mission was twofold: to clear the way. So that's the positive. So develop a critique of Greek philosophy, or the philosophy derived from Greek philosophy, critique, in order to use it in Islamic science. Because without critique, using it without critique was liable to actually achieve the purpose of the dominance of Greek thought, which Ghazali almost single-handedly made impossible. So in that context, it would be interesting to compare the role of Ghazali and Aquinas, for example, in the Christendom. Because the work of Aquinas, in a sense, paved the way for early modernity. On the other hand, Ghazali's work actually made it impossible that there would be any total dominance of Greek thought and any other thought similar to it on the Islamic sciences. That was his positive work. The second, more negative work was to develop a critique of philosophies which were being used by the remaining elements and sects belonging to the secret movement, Persian and Roman and Christians, which were trying to regain some of the grounds which they had lost to Islam. So Ghazali's work should be read in these two perspectives rather than in this perspective of any presumed revolt, which Iqbal is talking about here. And it is actually a great disappointment that Iqbal never actually took Ghazali seriously. And in that sense, he remained a disciple of Sir Syed Ahmad Khan, and a modernist, albeit an Islamically oriented modernist in these philosophical works. So it took them over 200 years to perceive, though not quite clearly, that the spirit of the Quran was essentially anti-classical. And the result of this perception was a kind of intellectual revolt. So there was no revolt, the full significance of which has not been realized even up to the present day. It was partly due to this revolt and partly to his personally based religion on his philosophical skepticism. The claim that Ghazali based his, and obviously he is referring here to Al-Munqidh min al-Dalal, his work on philosophical symbolism. That's a misreading of And probably by philosophical skepticism, I mean methodic skepticism, methodical skepticism of Cartesian variety. But some passages which talk about skepticism in Al-Munqidh, for example, they're more of spontaneous skepticism, more of Peircean skepticism, which is like spontaneous doubt rather than any method. So, I mean, the claim that he based his religion on philosophical skepticism is again not true, because if you want to see what he bases his religion on, we need to read Ihya, for example, and there we see that he is all Islamic. So he talks about senses and reason and revelation and all, and he adds to that the irfan or tasawwuf and metaphysical experience, which ilm al-irfan establishes. So his base is more like a traditional Islamic epistemological variety, senses, reason, revelation, and other Islamic sources, including, and especially in this regard, irfan, the metaphysical experience, which is not independent, subservient to revelation, because there is no revelation after the last revelation, but the experience that is ilham or revelation in non-boundary sense is still there, which is given to the awliya and sulaha, and that is the connection between the physical and the metaphysical, which Ghazali tried to re-establish. So his if there is any independent Ghazalian basis for religion, that's not philosophical doubt, it's the actual experience of the soul. For the mushahada, for the observation of al-haq, the truth, and how to develop that knowledge in such a way that it is subsumed under the revelation and the guidance by the revelation. That's the Ghazali's main revivalist agenda in Ihya. So I think I'll stop here and then we'll just pick up from here.